So there's always that one present that doesn't make it under somebody's tree. Okay, now it does almost sound a little bit like a joke, but what started out in the beginning as somebody showing an interest in building a budget type computer, or the budget computer that I did a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, maybe around a month ago or so. Somebody had asked and thought maybe they might want to buy that for Christmas for a present. And so I waited a couple of days, and in the meantime, somebody else had said, "Hey, look, if they're not going to do that, I'm looking for a computer that does X, Y, Z." So I said, all right. Now, I gave it a couple days. I didn't hear anything. I figured it was too late to try to figure out if that was going to be a Christmas present or not. So I went ahead and did some upgrades, and I turned the i3 into an i5, and then I went ahead and put some extra fans in. Well, I'd already put the extra fans in, but then I swapped out the GTX 1660 for an RTX 3060. The other person, Dustin, was looking for a little bit more powerful computer, and he thought this would be a better option. He wanted something that was going to be a little bit more powerful that he wouldn't have to upgrade right away. So I thought, okay, well, I wasn't sure if he wanted it or not. We still haven't we're figured it completely out. But in the meantime, I realized I hadn't tested anything with the 11400 and an RTX 3060. So it gave me a chance to go ahead and put the system together, test it out, and see how it compared to the other computers I've been building lately, including the one in the living room running 4K and my editing rig that I've got here. Now, I'm not going to compare all those numbers. I tested different games with different stuff, and I should have gone back and just run a full suite of benchmarks on everything all together and rerun everything. I didn't do that, but what I will do is I will go ahead and give you a breakdown and kind of show you how this did. Well, basically in comparison to itself. I did it in 1080p and I did it in 1440p, high, medium, and low. Or favorite quality, favorite quality, original, favorite performance, whatever the deal was. There's some things to remember about some of these tests. For instance, Forza Horizon 5 automatically sort of includes ray tracing in the extreme part of it. So Cyberpunk 2077 does something similar with FSR 2.0 or 2.1, where they will automatically go ahead and adjust the scaling. So the numbers will look better, or they will seem to be better than they may have been. Or in the case of Forza Horizon 5, it might look really, really good, but you might take a little bit of performance hit, and so you would have to use a little bit of upscaling. I wasn't so much worried about that because I was more curious of just how this system with the 11400 and the RTX 3060 would run, and if it would be similar to some of the other rigs that I've already put together. So I thought I'd give it a shot. Now, putting it together was pretty easy. All I had to do was swap a few things out. I did add the Deep Cool Tower Cooler onto it. If I remember the model name, I'll go ahead and put it in here. I'll also put it in the description. The 11400, the RTX 3060, the cooler, all this stuff, I will also go ahead and put all this down in the description and put all of it on ThatPaulGuy.tech. So if you're looking for any of these products, then it won't be any trouble to find. They're all Amazon affiliate links, which means it helps the channel out a little bit. Doesn't cost you any extra. So feel free to browse and look and do that. I'll have that updated on the website in the next day or two. And I think this is going to go live on January 1st. So for the new year, I will go ahead and put this in the description of the video itself. But in any case, I changed the memory out, I changed the processor out, I changed the video card out, and we did just a couple of things to make sure that this thing ran smooth. And then we went ahead with the benchmarks. So we did go ahead and run this through a full slate of benchmarks. I've got probably 8 or 10 games here. As always, we start out with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a AAA title from a couple years back. Very easy to test. It runs on a variety of different hardware, gives you a pretty good idea. Testing this on 1440p and 1080p. And I found it, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, very, very good. Solid 112, even at 1440 high, all the way down to where we're actually capping out 145 to 150 range as you're getting into 1440p low, and then of course 1080p medium and low. You're not going to get much better result than that unless probably the processor. I imagine the 11400 is holding a little bit back, but still, when I was looking at some of the other charts, it's fairly comparable to some of the other stuff that I was using faster processors on, like the 5800X. Borderlands 3, this is the one that usually I get hotter temperatures with this. Usually I get where sometimes I get little glitches here and there that some resolutions will work great, some won't. Usually it's fairly consistent. Sometimes you get those weird little numbers. This is one of those things where if you had it on the high setting, it really was a lot different than on the medium setting. And I don't know exactly what the difference in those two are, other than some of the textures are different. But 1440p when you're running on high was still well over 60 frames per second. So very, very playable, looked very good. And obviously that was the lowest one, 71 frames per second, all the way up to a high of 144 at 1080 low. Very, very playable, looked very good. It did run the temperatures up a little bit, and it does on most things. The CPU temp constant. Well, with the tower cooler it's got on there now, I believe the highest I saw it get was in the neighborhood of 70 or 71 degrees. Usually with a standard blower or something like that, it'll get in about 73 to 75 degrees on a CPU. This actually handled it quite well. I was very surprised, very pleased with the fact that I wasn't having massive temperatures, especially because that 11400 in the past has been harder for me to cool. Forza Horizon 5, like I said, this is one of those things where it automatically does, especially when you're testing on, say, Extreme and Ultra, it will go ahead and throw the ray tracing, the shadows or whatever, or the images. It will go ahead and do its own thing with that. But still, when you're on high, medium, and low, it doesn't do that as much or doesn't do that so much, and it's very easy to test. 90 frames per second, very solid. It surprised me how high it was, especially compared to something like Borderlands 3. So 90 frames per second at 1440p high, goes all the way down to 132 on 1080p low. Everything kind of fell in between. You can kind of see where that break is in between 1440 and 1080. Very, very happy with the way this worked out. Didn't have any major issues with running Forza Horizon. Every once in a while, sometimes I'll get a little bit of a glitch in this, but usually this one runs pretty well, and it did this time as well. Far Cry 6, this is the one, there is no issue at all with this 3060. This RTX 3060 has 12 gig of VRAM. So that means the random access memory, the video random access memory on the GPU, there's 12 gig. And Far Cry 6 sometimes would like to use about 4.5 or 5 at a minimum on some of these settings. It didn't have any issue at all here, obviously, because we've got more than enough VRAM to be able to handle a game like Far Cry 6. It did work out pretty well. It looked really good. I also, when I tested this before, sometimes even on good, what I would think would be good setups, sometimes I'd have kind of choppy video. None of that this time. Very, very smooth. Went very well. Temps were great. I didn't have any kind of issue with temps or any kind of issue with the way that it looked. It looked really, really solid. 1440p high of 83, all the way down to 125 for 1080p low. And the numbers kind of followed right in between. Even where 1440 and 1080 kind of the difference in them, it almost followed almost a stair step. It looked pretty good. It was pretty solid. No issues at all here either. World War Z, that's one of those that it did very much just kind of follow a stair step all the way down. From the 114 is the 1440p high all the way down to 200 frames per second on 1080p low. So this game will run very, very easily on this setup. No issues, no problems. The only thing I usually have a problem with on World War Z is when you first start it and the textures don't they don't load. Your first run or two, sometimes it'll go and it'll start out really well, like 60 or 70 frames per second, and then drop to like 20 frames per second. So you've got to run those benchmarks a couple times just to get an average. I always, usually on this one and Horizon Zero Dawn, I'll throw out the first one completely because I know that no matter how long I wait for that game to start or to start the benchmark, there's textures for some reason that are still loading at the beginning of that. So that first run that's always my throw out run. And then I'll run a couple of times, I'll take an average. Or if they're very consistent, say if I run 2 or 3 times and they're exactly the same, obviously that number's not going to change even if I run it 5 or 6 times. So in this case, 114 all the way up to 200. Solid, worked really well. I only had that one case where I had one drop where I had to drop the very, very first run as normal. Horizon Zero Dawn, this is one of those again where I always have to throw out the first run because it usually doesn't load and all the textures pop in or something like that during the first run. What surprised me on this one, and it's not shown here because it was an ultra quality or ultimate quality or something like that, where I started this on favorite quality and then all the way down to favorite performance, is I had the same frame rate for both the first two tests, even though one of them showed textures popping in and the other one didn't. So I was a little bit surprised by that. But it averaged out pretty well. I was able to get some solid numbers. There seemed to be no difference in frame rate or the way things looked. I mean, obviously, if you've been watching a while or you're testing a while, you notice some things. But to have 113 frames per second on 1440p low and 1080p high, it actually looked a little bit better in 1080p high, so that's what I would have gone with. But, I mean, this runs 80 frames per second on 1440 high, or 1440 favorite quality. So there's no problems, again, running this combination. 11400F and an RTX 3060 run very, very well. Great combination. Neither one of these bottlenecked each other very much, running normal benchmarks and just under normal use and normal load. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this game just looks beautiful. And I love running this benchmark, and I hate running this benchmark. The reason why I hate running this benchmark, we'll lead with that, is because every time you change the settings, you have to basically start the game over again. There's a couple ways to get around that where it doesn't take as long, but anytime you change the quality of the texture, say you go from high to medium or to ultra or extreme or what have you, you always have to completely restart the game. Whereas if you just change the resolution, then it'll go through the startup screen again, and you'll have to go through and hit the start button or hit the space bar, and then it'll tell you, whatever the deal is. It's one of the more difficult benchmarks, more time-consuming benchmarks just because of that. But the game looks gorgeous. The water, no matter, even if you're doing 1080p low, the water and everything just still looks beautiful, and it runs very, very easily. There was no issues with temperatures or anything. Matter of fact, I think I've got a little bit of B-roll. This thing didn't even hit 60 degrees on the GPU. So I mean, 98% load or something like that, 60 degrees. That inside of that case, very, very cool, especially under load like that. And I can't complain. 71 for a high on 1440p, and then all the way down to 127 for 1080p low. But I'm telling you, no matter what you choose to run this game on, it looks amazing, especially the water and all that stuff. Just a beautiful, beautiful game. With Cyberpunk 2077, the hang-up trying to test this game is always the fact that if you change the texture quality, say you go from medium to high, high to low, whatever the deal is, it doesn't matter. If you're on 1440p or then you switch to 1080p, you're going to get almost the same frame rate, or you were getting almost the same frame rate. I don't know if they've changed it now, but the results would say different on the end screen, but you would have within a couple of frames per second. What I found that I had to do trying to benchmark this was actually change the texture quality, high to medium, what have you, and then I had to change the resolution and then change it back. So 1440p high, if I changed it to 1440p medium, I would have to change it to medium, then select another resolution, then change it back to 1440p, and then run the benchmark. Extra few steps. CD Projekt Red, if you see or hear or anything, get feedback, fix this in your benchmarks, please. It's the benchmark itself runs fine. 65 frames per second on 1440p high is still very playable. And if you run, this game also comes with DLSS and FSR. So if you're running a little bit of a resolution, of your adjustment there, you should be fine. But 65 frames per second, all the way up to 119 at 1080p low. For this game, I remember when it first came out, I was trying to run on a 3700X with an RTX 2070. Decent graphics card, a couple generations old now, but decent graphics card, 8-core, 12-thread CPU. And I remember being feeling lucky that I was getting 42 frames per second when I was trying to run it on 1080p high. Now, I mean, this setup here, and I'll go back and I'll do some more tests here, but I haven't seen something in the mid 40s unless I was testing like a 4-core CPU, 4-core, 4-thread with a lower video card. I believe the Dell Optiplex was getting in the high 30s, low 40s or something on some of those tests. 65 at 1440p high, all the way to 119 at 1080p low. Very solid, look pretty good. I think most of the issues they've got graphics-wise are worked out. Maybe they just need to work on some of the benchmarks issues. But you know what? They keep improving this game, so maybe it'll be worth it if they keep improving and keep improving. Unless they start charging us for that, and then there's going to be a lot of people not so happy. But it is what it is, right? And finally, the esports title we're looking at, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. CSGO will run. Okay, it's not going to run on everything. It runs on a variety of things. It runs on some older hardware. It runs on some more difficult hardware to run things on. We found out recently it will not run on everything. I'm not going to say anything 6 frames per second and getting caught up in the particles. But anyway, it will not run very well on a 2-core 4-thread or an older 4-core 4-thread. This, however, is none of those. This is a 6-core 12-thread CPU that has an RTX 3060, handles it very well. 1440p on high is 334 frames per second, and then almost 400 frames per second on 1080p high. So, yeah, there's no issues running any kind of esports titles. So I don't think there's going to be any issue with a computer like this, a 6-core 12-thread CPU. We've got 16 gig of memory in there. There's an RTX 3060, which is a good middle of the road, mid-range GPU. I don't see there being any kind of issues at all just playing standard games with this. Anyway, that is all I have for this time. I just want to start the new year out by taking a look at something that may or may not end up going anywhere. I might end up having to break this down and use it for something else, but I realized that I did not have any benchmarks for this combination of a 6-core 12-thread Intel processor with an RTX 3060, and I needed to get that on the books so I could go ahead and compare that to some other things, which I will do now that I've got those marks on the book. Anyway, I hope everybody's having an incredible new year. It's 2023, promises to be a very, very interesting year, at least in my life, so we'll see how it goes. I hope yours is going to be amazing, and I'm just going to ask you to do one thing besides doing all those YouTube things, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit me up on the other socials. It's just be nice to each other. I know it's the season of giving has already gone, but don't forget that it doesn't cost anything, and it's no effort at all to be kind to somebody all year round. What can it hurt? Just be good to each other out there, okay? Hold the door open, smile, wave, things I tell you guys or ask you guys to do all the time. And until the next time, I don't know what the next video is going to be. I've got 2 or 3 things I'm working on, and I've ordered an RX 580. But I don't know when it's going to be here. I told you guys I was going to do that. I got it for under $100. So we'll see how it works. We'll see how it compares to the RX 480. Yeah, that might be interesting. Anyway, until I screw something up or tear something up next time, that's all I have. So I will see you later.